Welcome to our live trial coverage here at the Law and Crime Trial Network. Jury selection began today in New Mexico for actor and producer Alec Baldwin. He stands trial on one count of involuntary manslaughter. This is for the 2021 death of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins Baldwin, who was the lead actor for the Western film and a producer. The film was called Rust. Rust accidentally shot Hutchins with a live round that made its way into a prop gun. Baldwin maintains his innocence, saying that he never actually pulled the trigger. In a pretrial hearing yesterday, Judge Mary Marlowe Summer ruled that the prosecution cannot use Baldwin's role as a film producer against him. Now, this is a very important fact that the government want to bring out, to say that he should have known both as an actor, but also as a person who was in charge of production, or at least part of production, that there was an unsafe practices. So this was a significant ruling in favor of the defense. And we now have our very own Angenette Levy, who is outside Santa Fe County Courthouse with the latest. Welcome, Angenette. Well, we had you on about half an hour ago, 45 minutes ago. Any updates for us?
You know, Bob, no updates just yet. It looked like they were about to get started with jury selection, but they're still kind of working out some technical issues in the courtroom where they'll be conducting the jury selection. They were actually having some issues getting some of the jurors checked in. 70 people being summoned here to the courthouse this morning, so they had to get everybody in, probably a little bit like herding cats, as you can imagine, trying to get everybody in the same place at the same time to make sure everybody was ready to go, and then the technical issues in that courtroom, of course, so they had to switch courtrooms. So we think they could get started very soon. As I mentioned earlier, each side will have 50 minutes to question potential jurors, and then if they decide that there's something possibly personal that a juror feels they need to discuss in private, or if they have strong feelings about Alec Baldwin one way or the other, they may take a juror individually back into another area privately to question that juror, so they don't taint the remainder or the rest of the jury pool. So that's where things stand right now. We're still waiting for that questioning to begin, and we're hoping that will start sometime soon.
Angenette, I wanted to actually drill down on that when you talked to us about this in the last segment. So we all know that there's a great potential of prejudice that can happen, especially with a high-profile figure, both positive and potentially negative. So I'm really glad, and you cover cases around the country, do a great job doing so, and not all jury selections happen this way. Do I understand that the judge is going to permit the lawyers to give 50 minutes apiece for each juror?
That's what it sounded like. They would get 50 minutes to do their questioning for each side. That's what it sounded like when she laid that out yesterday, that each side got 50 minutes to do questioning. So we're going to wait and see. She said she would not do individual voir dire. So they're not going to bring each juror in one at a time. You know, they're going to bring in a pool, question them as a group. And then if there's something that somebody needs to discuss individually, they will take that person out so they don't contaminate maybe the rest of the jury pool with whatever they're discussing, or if it's a personal matter that they don't want to discuss. Another thing, Bob, that I think is important that we haven't really discussed yet, I was speaking with a jury consultant. His name is Richard Gabriel. I spoke with him for Crime Fix, our show on YouTube, and he said he was actually was O.J. Simpson's jury consultant and Casey Anthony's jury consultant. And he thinks that there will be a lot of questions about gun ownership. And we're in New Mexico, and I was talking to people when I got here about the gun culture in New Mexico. And one man that I spoke with when I arrived on Sunday told me that it's kind of like the Wild West here. A lot of people own guns, but they take that responsibility of owning guns very seriously. And Richard Gabriel, the jury consultant, thought that might become a big issue in jury selection, talking to people about their knowledge of guns, how they handle them, how they store them, gun safety, things of that nature. So that could be something that becomes significant in the questioning. We're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of these cases, that's a great point, Angenette. Where you are can make a big difference in how a jury is going to view how you, for example, handle this gun. Now, Baldwin is not a New Mexican resident. He's more of a Northeastern kind of guy, and they may not have the same culture, upbringing with respect to guns and things of that nature. And the thing that always gets me about these kind of cases is that they specifically hire people, in this case an armorer, to make sure like something like this doesn't happen. And I guess the question is going to be, Can actors rely upon the person hired to do this, or are they now independently required to check themselves? And if they don't, then they can be convicted of a crime versus an accident.
Mm-hmm. Well, that may become an issue, and that may be something that the juror that is going to be something the jurors will have to consider, mm-hmm. whether or not if this is ultimately the actor's responsibility or whether it strictly falls on the armorer. One jury has already determined that this fell on the armorer, that this was the armorer's responsibility. You know, you kind of see people say, you know, you have one job. Well, in this case, she had two jobs. She was doing the props, and then she was working as the armorer as well. But obviously the more important job of the two is the armorer. She was in charge of ensuring that there was no live ammunition on the set, that the guns were safe, that there were only dummy rounds in there when needed, things of that nature. So that was her job. And they've already determined, one jury has determined that she screwed up and that she was criminally liable. Now, there are other people who believe that it still falls on the actor as well, because you are trained, and there are Screen Actors Guild notices that go out about gun safety, and it says you don't ever point a gun at somebody. You know, even if the gun is empty, you act as if it's always loaded. And I know I've taken firearms classes in the past. I've taken 2 in my life. And that was something that was drilled into our heads. I took a day-long course one time, Bob, a few years ago. It was very interesting, actually. And the instructor was very strict. And that's how these people are. He was very strict. And I remember he said, you do not ever, and he was teaching us how to hold it and where to put it when you're not engaged with it, and how to hold it when you're shooting. And you don't ever point that firearm at somebody, even if it's not loaded, unless you intend to shoot somebody. And that is something that the prosecution, I think, is going to focus on very heavily.
Yeah, I've been wanting to address that particular thing for about a year or two. How long has this case been going on? 25 years? Whatever. During the ups and downs and the dismissals and the recharging and the charging and the recharging.
Almost 3, but yeah.
It's been a long time. Yeah, that's true. So do I understand, my rhetorical question back to the prosecution is that every movie that I see, a cowboy movie, a cop movie, when the final cut happens and I'm in the movie theater eating my popcorn and I'm watching the scene, that gun is not being pointed at or in the direction of the actors?
You're not supposed to at least point it at the camera. I mean, I haven't been on many film sets.
Yeah.
I've been, I've covered movies being filmed before, but I've not, but you're not supposed to, apparently, from what I've been reading, ever point the gun at the camera. You point it off to the side. I don't know if they're pointing it at the actor per se. I've read certain things where, it's all depending on how the movie is shot. But maybe it's CGI, maybe it's not a real gun, or it's a prop gun that looks like a real gun, but this was a real gun. So this is a gun and it had some dummy rounds in it, and it also had a live round, which it should not have had.
Yeah, Angenette,
but you're not supposed to. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, can you give us any clarity on when the judge, and you may not, and if you don't know, I understand, when the judge said that they were not going to allow the state to produce evidence that Baldwin was a producer unless they opened the door. Do you know what she meant by if they opened the door?
Well, I mean, I think that's just like anything. I mean, if they ask a question that opens the door to that information, do they ask a witness on the stand a question that opens the door to him being a producer? Yesterday, she acted like this would not be relevant because in that moment, in that instance, he was an actor handling and holding a gun. He wasn't a producer per se. Yes, he was the producer of the film, a producer of the film, and had responsibilities that go along with that. But in that moment of shooting that scene or rehearsing that scene, he was an actor with a gun in his hand, and they were kind of setting up a shot or rehearsing it. So if they open the door, I would assume if they ask a question and it leads a witness to opine or answer a question about him having that role as a producer, that could open the door. Or maybe if he testifies, I think that, all bets are off if he gets on the stand.
Angenette, you gave us some really good commentary for our audience that may not have been here in the previous hour. Can you talk to us a little bit about the atmosphere and specifically about Baldwin and what you have noticed with him? Well,
what I've noticed, and I mentioned this earlier too, he looked a little better today, I felt, but he looked very tired and almost, he's 66 years old. He's not a younger man anymore. He has 7 kids, 7 young children at home. So he looked kind of tired and almost walking with kind of a slumped gait yesterday. It was a little bit surprising. And I saw him on Sunday night and he looked kind of haggard. I just saw him from, for a brief moment. But I don't, he looks very concerned. He looks engaged when I've seen him in the courtroom, taking notes, talking with his lawyers, but also just, he doesn't want to be here, I'm sure. And I think the guilt of what happened has to be weighing on him. That's also probably a factor. Even though he doesn't believe he's criminally liable, he still went through that experience. He was holding a weapon that discharged and took a woman's life. So I think that there's a lot going on with this. Also, I mean, I don't think he exactly loves the press. So there's also that dynamic going on here as well. This morning, a reporter kind of ran up to him, and it was probably a little too close because we were kind of instructed to stay back, but we are being given access to get the video we want and need of him arriving. And Alec Baldwin kind of took his legal pad and kind of swatted, I have it on my Twitter feed, he kind of swatted the guy away a little bit. He was getting a little close. I mean, there is such a thing as personal space. So I think there's a lot going on here as far as that goes. I was able to confirm, Bob, that Stephen Baldwin, his brother, the Baldwin brothers, they're all actors, that Stephen Baldwin is indeed here. So I was able to get word about that since we last spoke.
Yeah, Angenette, you make a really good point about being haggard and the stress and the fact that he took somebody's life that we're sure that he's very emotional about. And people can be really like vitriolic. And even as a prosecutor, I may feel that I need to prosecute the case because it's in the interest of justice and deterrence to do it. But this is not an individual who woke up that day and wanted to kill somebody. So we need to put that in perspective as well. All right, Angenette, Levy.
And I think people need to understand that, Bob. No matter how people feel about Alec Baldwin, whether it's his politics or what you feel about what you've seen with the paparazzi or what have you over the years, you are right. This was not an intentional act. This was not a murder. This is an accidental shooting in which the prosecution believes he has criminal liability. So I think there's a distinction there that people really need to understand, and nobody has ever claimed that he did this on purpose.
Yeah, a huge point there, Angenette. Okay, thank you very much, Angenette. Great to see you again. Have a good time. We'll catch you on the next round, and we're going to take a quick break here on the Law&Crime Network. We'll be right back.